to try and walk the tightrope here of not going too hard on David Moyes, because the longer this debacle goes on, the more he actually starts to look like a victim. He's down. He's out. I mean, in boxing terms, he has been knocked out. He's on the canvas. I was going to say the referees counted to 10. The referees counted to 9. There's probably no need to run over and start sticking the boot in. So I do believe at this point, attention probably needs to turn to the ownership, because the club look completely and utterly rudderless at the moment. And when there's a vacuum like that, when it appears that whatever it may be, that a team, a club, a company, whatever it may be, is in turmoil, then you're really looking for strong leadership, and we have none. From what I can see at the moment, I can see very much David Moyes being sort of hung out to dry, left of the sacrificial lamb, if you want, whilst everybody above him remains silent. Let me just explain the situation as I see it, where I think West Ham are at the moment. And David Moyes is not impervious to criticism. I just think it's done. It's done its day. As I say, he's on the canvas. He's out. He's gone. We'll get to his comments about the game in a minute. But I just want to tell you what I think the state of the club is at the moment. David Moyes is a dead man walking. Everybody in the stadium knew he was a goner. And the team played like they knew he was a goner. In fact, Thomas Souček has even said in his post-match comments that they didn't follow his instructions, that the team didn't do as they were told. Now, while some might think that offers Moyes some level of mitigation, that he might have concocted some magnificent plan that would have beaten Chelsea, it's hard to make that case. We've taken so many thrashings this season. It also doesn't look good, because it shows that the team have just stopped listening to him. You can understand why, by the way. West Ham have conceded 70 goals this season. It's a ridiculous amount. It really is. It's a cataclysmic number of goals, really, as I understand it. And I've been looking at stats which people sort of throw at you. I think that's more than he conceded when he got relegated with Sunderland. If you took a snippet of the league table now from 2024, which I think is fair enough in terms of a cross section. So the start of the year, 2024, West Ham are in the bottom 3. It's pretty poor stuff. We do tend to leak loads and loads of goals, so it will be hard for the players to really have any belief when David Moyes gives a team talk and offers a tactical analysis of the opposition. I would understand a lot of the West Ham players for thinking, well, hold on, you know what you're talking about, mate. That's not going to stop. That's not going to help us win against the opposition. So that much I understand. However, we are where we are with the situation. So we've got this terrible run of form. The players appear to have stopped playing for David Moyes. You have the chairman of the football club who, as it appears, if rumours are to be correct, seems intent on recruiting a manager using a favoured agent in terms of Will Salthouse, and thus ignoring the choice of the person that's been appointed by the club to make the choice in the form of Tim Stuyton. Also appears to be ignoring the advice of Mark Noble, who apparently, Ruben Amorim is at the top of this list, but apparently there is a list of more talented coaches that certainly Noble and Stuyton feel than Lopetegui. But it appears that Sullivan wants to go with Lopetegui. So you've got a situation where you've got this manager who's being hung out to dry, you've got players not playing for the manager, and you have a situation where there are people within the club. I think they're non-executive. I think they'd be classed as non-executive directors, a sporting director and a director of football. Non-executive directors being basically directorial positions, but they're not executive members of the board, basically. But high-ranking West Ham officials are being ignored by the owner, who at the same time is doing a pretty damn indecent thing, I feel, by leaving David Moyes to suffer, I think. That is very much a club in crisis. It really is. No other football club in the Premier League is behaving in the way that West Ham are. And there's a reason that other clubs don't do that, because it's not really decent. Tony Cottee it was a long tweet, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, and Cottee said, basically give the man a break, give Moyes a break. Announce now that he's leaving and at least allow him to have a good send-off against Luton. I understand the sentiment and I do sort of agree with it, but I think we might even be past that now. I'm not sure he should really even be taking the team for Luton and Manchester City. I actually think it's cruel to leave him there. I really do. You also, just to add more crisis to the situation, is you have a situation where the manager after the game basically accused his players of lacking mental strength. You know, that's a hell of an accusation. You can think it. I'm sure many managers do sometimes. Think, you know, come on, toughen up, you lot. You've got to see the game through. You gave up. And West Ham players did give up. Absolutely gave up in that game. But for David Moyes to say it means he's just coming out and admitting it. I mean, he is an isolated, lonely man there. There's no doubt about it. Some of the pictures, the still images from the bench in the second half, and not just Moyes, all the people, Billy McKinley and Nolan behind him, they did not look good. Now, I understand any still image can look poor. But there are a lot of really, really bad ones. And I felt they sort of highlighted the despair that was clearly apparent on that bench. It's a situation whereby I don't feel there's any recovering from David Moyes. I mean, it is a weird one. You can't, if you're going to call out your players for being mentally fragile, particularly when they're your players. This is David Moyes' team. It's his squad. He's been given the moniker Dithering Dave over his transfers for a very good reason. We call it the David Moyes MOT. But what that actually really means is he's studious and he takes a long time not just to explore these footballers' playing capabilities, but also to look at their characters, their personalities. This is really important to Moyes. Every single one of those players has been cherry-picked. Also, we've been told for their mental fortitude. To suggest now that they're mentally weak, it just does not reflect well on Moyes in any way, shape or form. He's not behaving well now, Moyes. He's not. And this should be obvious from the hierarchy. He is struggling. Some of the stuff he's coming out with is nonsense. Absolute nonsense. It's a bit of a freak show, actually, at the moment. It's like that terrible singer at the start. They still do X Factor, Britain's Got Talent, whatever it is. You know, that panel show with Simon Cowell on it, and it's that terrible singer at the start who thinks he can sing and he can't sing, and he gets buzzed off. It's like that person just being allowed to sing and continue to perform and humiliate himself. That this appears to be what's happening. I admire and I sort of agree with the sentiment from Cotty, where he turns around and says, you know, if West Ham announce now that David Moyes is leaving, then he can get a send-off against Luton. Quite possibly that horse has already bolted. I think you may well be in the realms of, protest against David Sullivan. I'm not talking about mass protests. I'm not talking about pitch invasions or organised marches or anything like that. But I'm talking banners being snuck into the ground because it comes a point where you've realised the manager's no longer up to the job. Realistically, bearing in mind that Moyes has won us our first ever trophy, and he should have left at the end of last season. I think most would agree with that. That was his mic drop moment. Win the Conference League, leave. And the trouble is he's been allowed to sour his reputation to the point where it is quite difficult to have goodwill for him at the moment. And I never wanted that to happen. He should leave West Ham, well, as an iconic character. He should do. He won us a trophy. But the longer it goes on, the more bitterness there is towards him. Also, I think the line has been crossed. I think he's almost he's at maxed out bitterness. And I'm talking about people that don't like Moyes and want him gone. I think he's at maximum fury, if you want. And I do think it's now going to turn to the ownership because of their lack of leadership. I think they believe that they can sit quietly throughout all this. And I think if we all concede that the footballing world understands that David Moyes is going and he's a dead man walking, then most decent people will look at what's happening and think that's not a good look. It's an uncomfortable watch to watch someone struggling. As I say, to watch that boxer on the canvas carry on with punches being rained down upon him. It's not good. I record this video now late, very late on Sunday. In fact, it's technically a Monday morning. I would expect something to happen within the next day or two. I cannot, for the life of me, think that anybody would leave this vacuum of information from the club. Even if, let's just take the two most prominent people at the club, David Sullivan and Karen Brady. Even if they think it's a good idea to keep quiet, you'd hope that there was somebody with a little bit of something, a little finger on the pulse or something, who might say to them, you probably need to do something here. You probably can't leave this one. You're not doing yourself any favours. I don't know if that's happening. I will only assume that hasn't happened, because I do believe that they decided to get rid of David Moyes a little while ago, whatever, a month or two ago, whenever it might have been. 2 months ago, 4 months ago, it doesn't matter. I believe the reason more recently to leave him in place is to allow him possibly even a little bit of dignity and to do the decent thing. But I can tell you now, they're not doing a decent thing. This is indecent. This is not dignified at all. There's no dignity here. It's an undignified and classless end, and a situation that's completely and utterly avoidable. And I'll just go back to what I said at the start of the video. Even if you're not getting this decency and you're getting this terrible ending and this circus act, which it is. I mean, Mark Noble said the circus isn't here anymore. I mentioned a couple of days ago, it would not surprise me if someone walked away. I said this yesterday's video. Start in the morning. I said I would not be surprised if Stighton or Noble walked away. How could you operate within these parameters if they're true? You couldn't. I'll go back to what I said at the start. West Ham are in desperate need of leadership now. We need a clear, cohesive message explaining what the direction of the club is. There's no point hanging on. There's this mystical date. Oh, it's got to be the end of the season, got to be after the Man City game. No, we need it now. We need it absolutely now. I argued a few days ago that I didn't want a petition. I didn't want the fans to choose the next manager. I wanted Tim Stighton to do it. Because it's really important all that stuff comes from the club. So they must show that they're active, that they have leadership qualities, and they're capable of doing so now. Because to tell you something, I do think, and it's amazing, it's incredible that we've gone from winning a trophy to it being this disorganised. That the club is in such a bad state in such a short period of time. A penny for Daniel Kretinsky's thoughts or anybody else that has any kind of stakeholding in the club. I'd love to know. I've already had my suspicions for quite some time that possibly there was a takeover pending or something like that. If there was, I've never thought that less likely than right now. Because I think if you were about to take over West Ham, you wouldn't be allowing this to happen. You'd just say, right, do you know what? Forget it, move across now. I've got to step in here. Any competent business person, any person with a bit of dignity and a bit of decency would probably step in now, would probably be able to feel the pulse of the fan base and the wider football in general and understand that what's going on now is not good. And the more I look at it, the more I wonder, actually, those few people have said, no, there's no takeover. None of this is happening. Sullivan is in full control. Starting to look that way, isn't it? That's the way it's looking. But I will tell you this now. With full control comes full responsibility. And I really do feel this. if these next few days, maybe I'm going a little bit wrong with that. Maybe it's more, but the next little period, days, weeks, whatever it might be. Let's go with days because there's not the patience within football, within the West Ham fan base to deal with weeks of this. I can tell you that now. If those at the top get this wrong, I absolutely feel that there'll be no coming back from it.